The hall was cold and silent, full of strange lights and blinking machines. Hundreds of alien species sat in rows watching the center of the room. A bright spotlight fell on a metal platform, and on that platform sat a figure, thin, broken, silent, and alien mother with blue skin scars across her arms and a blank look in her eyes. She did not move, she did not cry, she simply sat with her hands folded in her lap. Her clothes were torn, her back slightly bent, and her spirit seemed gone. Her name was Z41, at least that was what they called her. Now a voice echoed in the chamber, the auctioneer tall with silver robes and a cybernetic eye. He spoke in a clear and sharp voice. Lot number Z41, a war refugee from the Virulent system, age unknown, status unstable, trained in healing and basic defense. Bidding starts now. Silence. Nobody raised a hand. Whispers moved through the crowd. A trader from the outer rim leaned to another and said, "She is useless." A soldier laughed softly and said, "She looks like she will break in a week." A scientist whispered, "She is mentally broken, not worth the risk." The auctioneer cleared his throat and tried again. Lot Z41, any offers? A pause, then, starting at 10 credits, 5-1, still nothing. The auctioneer clicked his tongue. "Very well, then, we will move to the next lot." Then a voice came from the back of the hall. It was calm, quiet, but strong. "I will take her." Everyone turned. It was a human, a male, standing in a simple jacket, dark hair, tired eyes. He looked like a worker, a nobody, but he walked forward without fear. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, sir. Do you know what you are offering for? She is broken, dangerous, unstable." The human nodded. "Yes, I still want her." The auctioneer shook his head. "Why, you can get 10 stronger workers for the same price." "She is nothing," the human replied. "She is someone. She is still alive. She just needs a chance." A murmur spread through the hall. Some laughed, some looked confused. Even Z41 turned her head slightly. Her eyes met his. She blinked once as if waking from a long dream. The auctioneer sighed. "Very well, but you must sign full responsibility papers. If she causes harm, you will be punished. You understand this?" The human nodded again. "Yes, give me the papers." "And one more thing." What the auctioneer asked. The human stepped closer to the platform. He looked at the woman sitting there. She stared back, still no words. Only her eyes showed a spark of something. "I'm giving her my last name from now on. She is not Z41. She is Kalari Mercer." The room fell silent again. The auctioneer froze for a moment. "You are what? Giving her a name? A family name? A human name?" "Yes, she is part of my family now," he answered simply. Kalari blinked again. Her lips trembled. She wanted to speak, but no sound came. Only her eyes told the story, a mix of shock, confusion, and maybe something close to hope. Papers were signed. Guards unlocked her collar for the first time in years. She stood, her legs weak, her body shaking, but she walked slowly toward him. She stopped in front of him and bowed her head slightly. He offered his hand. She looked at it, then slowly, gently placed her hand in his, and they walked out of the hall. 2 figures, one broken, one tired, but together behind them. The crowd whispered, "A human adopted a war ghost. What a fool. What a waste." But the auctioneer watched them leave, and for a moment he wondered, was it foolishness or something else? Outside the hall, the stars shined bright, and Kalari looked up. Her first words in years came out as a whisper. "Why?" Eli Mercer smiled. "Because everyone deserves one chance, and that was the beginning of something the galaxy would never forget." The ship flew quietly through the dark space like a ghost among stars. No noise, no warning, just smooth, silent motion in the void inside the small ship. Kai Larry sat near a window, her fingers resting on cold glass, eyes staring out but not seeing. Her breath slow, her body still, her mind a storm of memories. She did not understand why the human had done this. She had no name, no voice, no worth. And yet now she was called Kalari Mercer, given a name by a stranger who owed her nothing, a human. She watched the stars pass like falling sparks and wondered what came next. Eli Mercer sat near the control panel, his jacket thrown over the seat, his hands working with quiet ease. He had done this before, flying alone, traveling across systems, picking up spare work, fixing broken things. He never thought he would be responsible for someone else, especially not for someone like Herc. Larry slowly turned her head toward him, studying his face. There was nothing special in it, no great power, no noble blood. Just tired eyes and calm hands, but something about him was different from the others. He had looked at her like she was real, not cargo, not danger, not burden, real. He spoke at last, voice quiet like a soft hum. We will reach Arco Station by morning. You can rest, no need to worry. Here she said nothing. Only blinked once and looked away, her heart still heavy, her memory still sharp, the sound of fire, the screams of her child taken from her arms. The cold hands of the doctors, the collars, the cage, the silence, always the silence. Eli stood and placed a small package near her seat, food, water, clean clothes, no words, just actions. She looked down at the bundle and then back at him, still silent, but something inside her moved later that night while Eli slept on the floor with his jacket as a pillow. Kailari walked softly around the small cabin. She touched the tools on the wall, the worn-out chair, the control panel. Everything had marks of use and age, no shine, no gold, but full of life. She found a small photo near the pilot seat, a woman, human, smiling, holding a child, and next to her Eli, younger, still tired, but smiling too. On the back of the photo were 4 words written in ink. We had our chance. Kailari held the photo close, not knowing why. She felt a weight in her chest, something old, something soft. Then she heard a sound, a soft click. A message began to play from a hidden device near the bed. Eli's voice filled the cabin. If you found this, I guess you are someone who needed to. Her name was Mara. She was my wife. She died in the fire on Terra 7 when the mines collapsed. Our son was with her. I could not save them, and I never forgave myself, so I kept moving, helping others, fixing what I could. But nothing fixed. Kailari stood frozen. The voice continued. Then I saw her, Z41. They called her, and I saw the same look in her eyes, the same pain, the same silence. And I knew if no one else would help her, I would, because everyone deserves one more chance. Even if they do not ask for it. The message ended. Kailari sat down slowly. Her hand still holding the photo, she looked at the stars again, but this time her eyes were different, not lost, not empty, just unsure, but open. Morning came. The ship landed on Arco Station, a floating hub of old ships, metal towers, and glowing signs. Eli led her through the crowd, not holding her, not pushing her, just walking beside her. She followed, close, her head low, but her steps stronger. They reached a small unit on the lower deck, simple, clean, quiet. This is home for now, Eli said. You can stay as long as you want, or leave if you ever choose. You are not a prisoner. She looked around and then looked at him. She opened her mouth slowly, her voice dry, unused, but still there. Why? He smiled a little. Because you are not Z41, you are Kailari Mercer. Now she repeated the name in her mind. Kailari Mercer, not a number, not a ghost, not forgotten. That night she sat near the window again. The stars still burned, but now they felt a little warmer, a little closer, like they knew her name too. The room was quiet, not empty, not cold, just quiet, like the space between 2 storms. Kailari stood near the mirror in the small washroom, her fingers tracing the lines on her face, the scars on her neck, the marks left by war and memory. She did not cry. She did not speak. She only stared at the reflection of someone she did not fully know. The woman in the mirror looked like a survivor, but felt like a shadow. The name Kailari Mercer repeated in her mind like a soft whisper that refused to fade in. The main room. Eli repaired an old food unit, wires sticking out of the panel, sparks dancing on his hands. He worked without speaking, the way someone works who has been alone for a long time. He knew she watched him sometimes, not with fear, but with distance, like a person staring at a fire, unsure if it gives warmth or burns. Every morning he placed a cup of warm tea on the table near her seat. He never forced her to drink, never asked questions, never looked disappointed. He simply placed it there and went about his day. Some mornings she ignored it, some mornings she touched it but never drank. But this morning she picked it up, held it for a long time, and took one small sip. Eli saw her do it, but said nothing. He smiled only when she was not looking. That evening the power went out for 5 minutes. Kailari froze in the dark, her breath quick, her heart loud. The silence reminded her of the prison ships, the empty cells, the flashing lights, the screaming that never ended. She crouched in the corner, arms over her head, her voice trapped inside her. When the lights came back, Eli was standing a few steps away, not touching, not staring, just there. He knelt slowly, placed a small glowing cube on the floor between them, and backed away. The cube projected a soft light with a moving image of a peaceful forest, wind blowing through tall red trees. She looked at it for a long time, her breathing slow, returning to rhythm. Then she whispered without meaning to, "I am not dangerous." Eli nodded. "Once I know." She sat on the floor near the cube, not saying more, not needing to. That night she dreamed of the red trees. The next morning Eli was gone for a few hours. He returned with a small bag of tools and an old box filled with metal scraps and Strange alien pieces. He said nothing, just placed them on the table and began to sort them. She watched in silence. After some time she walked over and sat across from him. Her fingers moved slowly, unsure but precise, as she picked up a small gear and began cleaning it. Eli did not speak. He smiled only with his eyes and passed her a small brush. For hours they worked together in silence, not empty silence, not cold, just quiet understanding. One evening, Kalari woke from sleep with a loud gasp, sweat on her face and shaking hands. She had seen her child again in her dreams, seen the day the soldiers came, the way they tore him from her arms, the way they told her he would be useful for science. She sat on the floor, knees pulled close, heart breaking again and again in her chest. Eli found her there, said nothing, and sat beside her. He pulled out a small square device from his pocket and pressed a button. A gentle sound came from it, not music, not noise, just a soft pulse like a heartbeat. He placed it on the floor and leaned back. Larry stared at the device, then at him. "Why do you help me?" she asked, her voice low, unsure. "Because I see the same pain I had," he said without looking at her. "Because when no one helped me, I broke, and you should not have to break." She looked down at her hands. "I'm already broken." He shook his head slowly. "You are healing. Broken things can still hold light." She did not respond, but stayed near him longer than usual. One afternoon, Kalari stood in the hallway alone, looking at the door. She reached out and touched the panel, but did not open it. She remembered freedom, real freedom, the kind with risk and fear, but also choice. She pulled her hand back and whispered. Soon later that week, while Eli worked under a console, she placed a cup of tea beside him. He looked at it, then at her. She nodded. Once he took the cup and drank. That night, Kalari spoke again, a full sentence. "I want to find my son." Eli looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded. "We will." Outside, the stars moved slowly across the black sky. Inside, two souls sat in a small quiet room, one healing, one helping, both human in their own way. The message came in the middle of the night, soft and strange, hidden behind layers of noise and static, like a whisper lost in time. Eli was awake, sitting near the console, checking signals, scanning trade routes, fixing power glitches, when the screen blinked red for a second and then turned blue. He leaned closer, eyebrows tight, as the words slowly appeared across the screen. Subject Z41 offspring located, unknown location classified, data extraction in progress. He froze for a moment, then looked over his shoulder. Kalari was asleep, her head resting on her arm, breathing soft, slow, peaceful in a way he had never seen before. He turned back to the screen and copied the message onto a secure drive, his hands shaking just a little. The words felt like a spark. In a cold room, her son alive morning came with soft light and quiet air. Kalari stood near the kitchen unit, placing pieces of dried fruit onto a plate, her hands steady, her eyes focused. Eli walked in, holding the drive in his hand. He waited until she looked at him, then he said 5 words, "I found something for you." She took the drive, slowly placed it into the console, and watched as the message repeated again. Subject Z41 offspring located. Her knees gave way just slightly and Eli caught her. Before she fell, he did not speak. She did not cry, but in her chest something opened like a door she had sealed shut years ago. A door filled with hope and fear and fire. They packed in silence. No questions, no debates, no hesitation. Eli knew someone would be watching them once the message went out. He had seen what the military did with alien genetics. He had seen children used for research, for cloning, for control. He had seen mothers silenced and records erased. They would not let her just walk in and take him, but they would not stop him either. The ship launched with quiet engines and dim lights. Chia. Larry sat beside him, her fingers wrapped around a metal token with her son's name engraved in her language. She whispered his name again and again, like a prayer or a weapon. Tarin, Tarin, Tarin. The coordinates led to a remote moon near the edge of a dead system, a lab hidden beneath stone and ice. Eli landed the ship on the far side of the ridge, walking the rest of the way with Kalari close behind, both wearing thermal suits and quiet steps. They reached the door without a sound. He hacked the outer lock with tools built from scrap. Inside the lab, the air was sharp and cold, the walls covered in blinking monitors and sealed doors. Kalari's breath caught as she saw the symbol on the wall, the same mark burned into her skin years ago when she was taken. This was not just any lab. This was the place they built weapons from living things. They moved fast through the corridors, avoiding cameras, using vents when needed, silent as shadows. Eli's map showed the storage level below the labs. He pointed and she nodded her face. Hard, her eyes burning, they found the door locked behind a biometric scan. Kailari stepped forward, placed her hand on the panel, and the door opened without resistance. Inside were small pods glowing blue and cold children sleeping in stasis. She walked past each one, her fingers trembling, until she stopped at the seventh pod. Her breath caught. There he was, towering unchanged, still young, as if no time had passed. She placed her hand on the glass and whispered his name, Eli. Check the systems, began unlocking the pod sequence. As he did, a second pod nearby blinked. Inside was another child, similar but different, a mix of alien and something else, a clone, an experiment. Kailari stepped back as she saw the second face. This was not just about her son. This was something darker. Alarms began to echo through the hall, red lights flashing. Security had found them. Eli grabbed both children, pulling the clone's pod out with Tarings. Kailari lifted her son with shaking arms, holding him against her chest as he stirred, eyes fluttering, lips forming one word, Mame. They ran through the hall, chased by cold footsteps and loud voices. Eli threw smoke bombs, hacked doors, melted locks with plasma heat. Larry held her son close, using her own body to shield him from stray shots and chaos. At the edge of the facility, Eli turned and fired one last charge, blowing the entrance behind them, sealing the lab in flames. They reached the ship, breathless, hearts racing. The child clone awoke and looked at Kailari, confused, eyes wide. She knelt and placed a hand on his cheek, and he did not flinch. He only whispered, "Do I belong?" She looked at Eli, who stood there waiting for her answer. She nodded slowly and whispered back, "You do now." The ship lifted off the fire below, fading into black. Inside the cabin, a mother held one child by blood and another by fate. Eli sat across from them, eyes closed, shoulders heavy but steady. The stars outside moved like whispers in the dark. And for the first time, Kailari felt not alone, not broken, not afraid. She was a mother again. She was Kailari Mercer, and she was not done yet. The silence in the ship was deeper than before, not empty, not peaceful, just filled with things unspoken and wounds not yet understood. Kailari sat beside her son, brushing his hair with soft fingers, his eyes half closed, his breath steady, his body still carrying the cold touch of stasis. Eli sat near the console, scanning the data from the clone's pod, reading files hidden behind heavy encryption, locked with symbols used only in high military research. He had seen these codes once during his time in Black Ops, during the worst days of the Earth Coalition War, when they turned orphans into assets and pain into science. The screen blinked and words began to appear. Project Echo Phase 2, Subject Hybrid KA41. Base genes from Subject Z41, enhancements added under Directive Silent Harvest, purpose classified. Property of Terran Biodefense Command. Eli leaned back, eyes dark, hands gripping the edge of the panel. The boy sleeping in the second cot was not just a clone. He was a weapon made in secret, raised in a tube built from someone else's panka. Larry watched both children, her son and the other one who looked like him but not quite. Taryn had her eyes, her voice, her spirit. The other had her face, her silence, but something colder, like he had been shaped without dreams. She reached toward him and paused. Would he flinch? Would he fear? But he did not. His eyes opened slowly, and he stared at her like someone trying to recognize a story told in a language he had never heard before. She whispered softly, "Do you know who you are?" He did not answer. He only reached for her hand. They reached a quiet outpost on a forgotten moon, deep in the rim, far from patrols, far from scanners. Eli had a contact. There's someone who owed him too many favors to say no, a doctor named Reyna, who once left the military after refusing to wipe memories from rescued children. She greeted them without questions. Eyes sharp, heart tired, hands gentle. She ran tests while the children slept, while Kailari stood by without blinking, while Eli paced like a storm, waiting to break. Reyna's voice was low when she returned with the results. Taryn is stable, no damage, no trace implants, no trackers. But the clone, she paused and looked at Kailari before continuing. He is something else. His body is enhanced, his blood can process alien and human oxygen mixes, his bones are reinforced, his neural growth is accelerated, and deep in his brain there is a control. Kailari's hands tightened, her breath slow but sharp. You mean he can be controlled? Reyna nodded slowly. If they send the signal, yes. He will become what they made him to be. Lai stepped forward. Can it be removed? Not safely, not here, not with what I have, but maybe if you reach the old station near Vega Drift. There was a rebel tech there who decoded Terran implants before they disappeared. Ka. Larry looked at the boy who now slept with one arm over Tarine as if they were brothers. They were not born as such. But war made family out of strangers. Eli checked the system again. His signal reader blinked. He frowned. They found USA bounty notice appeared across the screen. Eli Mercer wanted for military theft. Z41 classified asset. Children marked as experimental property returned. Demanded bounty. Live trackers active. Larry stared at the screen, then turned to Eli. We are targets now. We always were, he replied without fear. But now we fight as a family. They packed quickly. Reyna gave them what supplies she could. She hugged Kalari without words, her eyes filled with guilt for a world that broke so many for so long. The ship took off under a silent sky, stars blinking like old scars across the black. Kalari sat between the children, one hand in each of theirs. They did not speak, but both leaned into her warmth like branches toward Lightilai. Checked the map. Vega Drift was days away through unstable routes across pirate zones and abandoned sectors, but they would get there. They had to. That night, Kalari stood near the window watching the stars. She thought of the child she carried once, the screams, the cold tables, the pain that never left. She thought of the boy born from that pain, not by her choice, but still hers now, still needing her voice, her hands, her protection. Eli stepped beside her. They took your blood and made a weapon, and you still gave that weapon your hand. Why? She looked at him, not with sorrow, but with something stronger, because he never asked to be made, but he still deserves to live free. Even weapons want to be children. Even weapons dreamed. The ship flew forward into shadow. But inside, a fire burned quietly. A mother, a maker, a fighter, and a name. Kalari Mercer *. The stars ahead burned quiet but fierce, like old memories that refused to fade, like promises kept in silence. The ship moved between wreckage and forgotten trails, past drifting satellites and frozen cargo ships long dead. Inside, Eli sat at the pilot seat, scanning systems, checking sensors every few seconds, his hands steady, his jaw tight. Behind him, Kalari stood with both children, one asleep, and the other quietly drawing shapes on the metal wall with a broken stylus he had found under the seat. They had not spoken since the message came, since the bounty increased, since every corner of space now carried their names and their faces and the words, wanted, dangerous, unstable. But Eli did not slow, Kalari did not tremble, and the children, they simply breathed. The message came in short bursts coded in an old rebel cipher. Help us help you. Vega Drift holds answers, but you must give something back. Ka. Larry read it again and again, her thoughts moving like waves crashing across rocks everywhere. She went. Someone wanted something, her blood, her body, her silence, her child. Even now, the galaxy whispered trade, sacrifice, exchange, but Eli, he never asked for anything, not even thanks. She stood in the small kitchen unit preparing food from the scraps. Rene gave them slicing dried fruit, heating synth bread, mixing powder that smelled faintly of citrus. Tarine sat nearby watching her movements, mimicking her hand motions with a quiet grin. Across the room, the clone child stared at a small photo stuck to the wall with tape. It showed Eli and a woman smiling, holding a child with light hair and wide eyes. He pointed at it and whispered, "Is that your human family?" Larry paused, then walked over and knelt beside him. That was Eli's family. They are gone now. He looked at her with eyes that held questions he could not ask. Am I part of this now? She reached for his hand and held it tight. If you want to. Beatty's ship landed on Vega Drift, a broken station built into a dying asteroid. Its metal bones shaking under its own weight, its lights flickering like failing stars. They moved through empty halls guided by signal beacons, past graffiti warnings and makeshift barricades. Eli carried a power cell on his back. Kalari walked with the children, close one on each side like shields made of love. At the center of the station they found him. Old tech rebel eyes replaced with lenses, fingers stained with ink and wires and plasma burns. He smiled like someone who had lost everything and laughed. Anyway, name Solas, you brought me something heavy. Eli placed the clone child in front of him. Kalari stood behind, arms crossed, heart racing. Can you break the control inside him? Solas nodded slowly. I can, but only if you give me access to the code, and I know where it hides. He turned to Kalari. It's inside you two, buried in your nervous system. Your pain carries the Kalari closed her eyes for a long time, then opened them. Itzulus worked for hours connecting wires, reading signals, mapping brainwaves, and unlocking sequences written by machines without mercy. Eli stayed at the door watching shadows moving behind cracked Windows ready to defend, ready to fall. The children sat in silence, holding each other's hands. Their fingers tight, their fear shared. When it was done, Solas looked older, tired, broken. It's out, no more chains, but they'll come for you harder now. You've taken away their control, and that makes you dangerous. Scullery helped the child sit up, his body weak, but his eyes clear. He looked at her with something new, not confusion, not fear, but trust. They returned to the ship in silence. As it launched, Kalari looked at Eli. They'll never stop, will they? He shook his head slowly. No, but neither will we. In the days that followed, Kalari trained both children not to fight, but to stand, to breathe with control, to walk with strength, to speak with truth. They learned to move like her, soft, but unshaken, quiet, but fierce. Eli fixed the ship again and again, systems failing from stress, engines coughing like old dogs refusing to quit. He watched the family grow, not by blood, not by plan, but by choice. One night, the clone child sat beside Kalari and asked a question that made the stars seem to pause. Can I have a name, a real one? She smiled, not with lips, but with soul. You already do, Kalen. It means second light in my language. The one who rises after darkness. He whispered it to himself again and again. Kalen Mercer, Kalen Mercer. Kalen Mercer. Later, Eli carved 3 names on the inner wall of the ship: Kalari Mercer, Taryn Mercer, Kalen Mercer family. The alarms rang 2 nights later. They did not run. They stood when the ships approached, ready to take them back. They did not hide. They fought together, because names meant more than blood, because family meant more than war, because mercy was not weakness, it was their greatest strength. And Kalari, she was no longer forgotten. She was Mercer, and Mercer meant home. The sky above Vega Drift was rust red and cracked like dry bone, like old memories forgotten by time but never forgiven. The landing bay was half ruined, metal sheets curled and scorched wires hanging like dead vines from broken towers. Eli stepped out, first scanning with tired eyes, hand on his sidearm, boots crunching on dust that was once part of a city. Kalari followed with Taryn in her arms, and Kalen close behind, both children quiet, not from fear but from weight, the kind of weight no child should carry. Inside the station, the air smelled like rust and burned plastic, a place left behind by governments, by empires, by heroes. They moved through narrow halls, past graffiti written in blood and ash: trust no one save yourself, freedom is a cost. Mercer read the words and kept walking. The signal led them to a door welded shut with old steel and old code. Eli knocked once, twice, then waited. A hiss, a slide. The door opened, revealing a narrow space filled with light and smoke and machines that looked like nightmares made of wire. The man inside did not smile, he simply nodded. Once you brought the ghost. His name was Solas, a tech reborn from war, his eyes replaced by data lenses, his voice cracked like old speakers, his hands covered in synthetic skin that never healed. Right? He looked at Kalari for a long time, then at Kalen, then at the scars on her wrist. You still carry the encryption. Without it, I cannot set him free. Kalari sat on the metal chair, breathing, slow eyes steady. What will it cost? Solas stared through her like glass pane. She nodded once and did not move when the wires were attached, when the signals burned her spine, when her fingers twitched, when her vision blurred with colors no one should see. Kalen stood nearby, unmoving, watching her, watching himself reflected in her struggle. He had no memory of birth, no memory of parents, no lullabies, no nights under stars, just commands, just training, just silence. But this was family, the final sequence. Unlocked with a sharp tone, Solas leaned back, eyes dim. It is done, the key is broken. He is his own. Kalari reached out with shaking hands. Kalen took them without hesitation. I feel different, I feel alive. Eli stepped forward, scanning the comms. Again they know, the bounty tripled. We are listed as insurgents, not just targets. Symbolska. Larry looked at him, not with fear, but with calm. What now? Now we decide what family means. They moved again, this time to an old freighter yard where forgotten ships slept in rows like tombstones of dreams. Eli traded scraps and knowledge for a hull, for parts, for fuel. Kalari taught the children how to build not just machines, but discipline. She showed them how to balance, how to listen, how to fall without fear, how to rise without apology. Taryn learned fast, his eyes bright, his curiosity endless. He asked questions about stars, about planets, about love, about food. Kalen spoke less, but when he did, his voice was sure, like someone who had decided to matter. They ate together, worked together, breathed together. One night, as dust storms rose across the outer windows, Taryn asked a question so quiet it almost faded. Why do they hate you? Scolari looked at the stars and answered slowly. Because we remind them what they broke, because we survived, Eli added, without looking up, because family built from pain scares the ones who only know power, Kalen whispered. But we are not broken, no, Kalari said. We are chosen. The next morning, Eli painted a name on the side of the ship. Mercer, no flags, no weapons, just the name. They flew into deep space, running low on fuel, high on hope, not sure where they were going, but sure they would go together. One system out, they picked up a distress call, weak and fragmented. A colony ship caught in an ion storm, civilians trapped, engines failing. Kalari turned to Eli. He nodded before she spoke. They dropped from warp into chaos, fire tearing across the void, alarms blaring, voices crying for help. Eli jumped into action, sending stabilizer codes, transmitting calm signals, patching power where he could. Kalari suited up, walked across fire and vacuum and darkness, carrying supplies, lifting metal, pulling children from crushed halls. Tyrene stayed at the controls, repeating her instructions perfectly, his hands never shaking. Kalen stood at the door, ready with medkits, learning not just how to heal, but how to stay when it was done. When the colony ship was stable and the last survivor carried to safety, a voice came through the coms. Who are you? Why did you help? Eli smiled. Mercer, Kalari added, because no one helped us, so now we help others. Kalen whispered. Family does that. Tyrene nodded. Always. They flew away before the officials could arrive, before the bounty hunters could trace them, before the world could twist what they had done into another. They were not soldiers, not rebels, not fugitives. They were Mercer, and that meant something now.